Today I'm here to talk about the considerations for entering into the resources sector, and I would like to thank RESA for the opportunity. So the first thing we're going to talk about is just a brief overview. So the resources sector is a complex and high-risk environment. It's very commercial and and can attract higher margins. But there is a lengthy process of engagement, and it is market and price sensitive. So all of these considerations need to be made when you're looking at the resources sector, because certainly within the mining and oil and gas sector, there are opportunities, but it's actually knowing what the cost of the compliance and the cost of doing business with the resources sector is. There's a high level of compliance to systems, process and procedure, and it's also subject to extremes. So, there can be weather conditions, technology changes, and those sorts of things need to be considered when you're looking at the scopes for which you want to come into the resources sector. So I always have these conversations with people around, well, okay, if I'm in the resources sector, how do I get noticed? Well, it's really important to showcase your business. And it's not just about going to trade shows and social media. They're all good influences. It's good for people to see that you're visible. It's also good to actually have references. It's also good to have accreditation. Things like ISO, all of those things add to the credibility of the business. It also says that you've got the systems and process in order to work in the hydrocarbons or in a mining environment. So I like to think that the story has to be unique. It has to be different. And if you have something sort of special to sell to the resources sector, that's a significant plus. The brand and what it represents, and the culture, understanding the cultural differences and how you can fit into that resources sector environment is really, really clear. But I also do believe that the networks and relationships are fundamental. And if you're considering entering into the resources sector, having someone that has worked in the resources sector and understands the organisations and how they work is really, really important as well. So when the resources sector goes out to the market and you've got this great scope of work and you know what you're doing, they have a variety of ways that they will approach the market for that scope. So they may come along and pre-qualify a lot of suppliers. They might do an expression of interest. They might do a request for information. They might do a request for tender. And then there's a few more out there that they'll do as well. You really need to understand that that cost of doing that is yours, and it can be a very lengthy process. So I think one of the things is that when you're actually looking at these tenders and the clients approaching the market, you really need to look at the relationships within those organisations, the legals, the scope, how appropriate it is to you, and understand the risk that the client is actually saying, right, this is what we want you to do and what we want you to manage. So when you get a tender, it's really good to sit down and do a pre-contracts tender strategy. I think that's always a must. A typical procurement process is used across all of these various different levels of delegation of authority, etc. But basically the business sits down and says, what do we need? How are we going to source it? How are we going to contract it? And how are we going to manage it? If you understand the basics of what they require, it makes it a lot easier. If you have the standard templates, so it will also reduce your cost as well, so that you're not doing these bespoke tenders every time. It's really, really important. So understanding the client needs is really going to make the difference between whether you win or lose. Actually listening to the clients. I've been parts of reading tenders over the last 30 years, and actually just answering the client's questions is a significant win. So I think before you get to that point, understanding their organisation, their structure, the commodity, the volatility with the commodity, whether this is a cost-driven environment, which clearly every environment seems to be, the risk profile, the issues and challenges, the business strategy, the people is key, safety and environments. How can you provide support to deliver is really, really important. So understanding that clients, because there will be an additional cost. It's not because of the risk associated with these industries. So when we talked about understanding and managing risk, let's just give a brief overview of that. Doing business with anyone has a level of risk. Health and safety and environmental in the resources sector is a very high priority, if not the highest. Understanding the requirements around that is really important. Having a good safety management plan, either being ISO accredited or AS4801 accredited, any of those sorts of things add to your credibility. Understanding the company structure, the legals associated with dealing with these organisations, indemnifications and everything else, all the commercial components. Industrial relations could be an interesting conversation with them. What EBAs do you roll on? Distribution, shipping or logistics to various remote sites can mean damage to your equipment. So there's a whole gambit of risks that need to be understood and mitigated by certain controls. That's really important to do that risk assessment and work out whether it's suitable for you. The evaluation process within the operators or your potential clients is really robust and can be quite lengthy. So normal price validity kind of goes from 90 to 180 days. So they will make sure that conflicts of interest are declared and they'll have robust strategies. They'll also have a tender evaluation plan, and a lot of them will have procurement boards where the leadership sits on and agrees that this is the way forward. But the evaluation criteria can be really, really simple, and it's always hidden in the tenders. So, sometimes it can be really visible, but people still don't take any notice of it. And at times there'll be a go, no-go process on health and safety. So if you have a poor safety record and there are issues, then it could be a very quick no-go and you're out of the race. They will look at the scope and whether you can deliver it, the project management side, the compensation, your schedule of rates or how you've structured the commercials, your capability, key resources, and things like your compulsory social reporting. Some of the things around local content is really topical at the moment, and that Indigenous and diversity, Indigenous employment, diversity, and even down to social procurement. You know, the social procurement covering disadvantaged in accordance with the social development guidelines that the UN placed out a few years back. And the final is all around understanding and developing, understanding your capacity and capability of your business. There's no point tendering for work that is impossible to deliver and way beyond your financial capacity. It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So, and there's a cost associated with it. Sometimes I think if you're going to enter the resources sector, it's a small bite of the elephant. Pick a scope that's manageable to get the experience that you need to build those case studies. You know, you're not going to go for a massive contract, just small bites of that unique scope of work that you have. Know the capacity of your business and what are the risks that you're prepared to take. And, you know, the risk might be, I want to stay in South Australia, I don't want to go across the border. Well, there's negatives with that and there's positives with that. Understand the compliance costs within your business. You may be compliant for business in Adelaide, but in remote communities, remote sites, etc., non-compliant. And so sometimes you think, right, well, in order to enter the resources sector, I probably need a couple of people that's worked in the resources sector that actually understand it intimately. And then that will help reduce your costs, and it'll also help with your business development and your networking. I hope that a few of those pointers today will be useful for you, and I thank you very much for your time.